This story starts in the kitchen of a family in Swaziland, in Mbabane, in August of 2010. I walked into the kitchen in the mid-morning, and there were 3 young children at the table eating breakfast. And the food was just white bread, torn up into chunks, floating in sugar water. And the bread had sort of puffed up like marshmallows. I discovered that this was one of 2 meals of the day that they had been given by a local soup kitchen. And I was really shocked. I mean, this was really just dead food that they were eating. But I thought this had to be an anomaly. This couldn't be normal. Until I got back to Cape Town and started reading through some of the literature and discovered that thousands and thousands of children around Southern Africa start their day just like this every day, eating highly refined carbohydrates, sugar, and not much else. So I'm a science writer, and I have spent the past decade writing mostly about climate change, environmental crises of sorts, energy issues. And I decided to spend the last 4 years looking at this idea of food security, whatever that means, I didn't know, particularly in the context where 60% of us now live in cities. So we are very far removed from the soil that gives us our beef stroganoff and our southern fried chicken and our can of Coke and our apple pie. And I discovered that there's a very profound problem with how we grapple with this issue of food security, particularly as we think about how to feed the world's population, which will reach 9 billion by the middle of the century, when we have limited soil, limited water, limited atmospheric space. And this is the problem. We focus so much on how to optimize calories per hectare, how to produce more food on the same amount of land. We don't question what we do with those calories. So this is, you don't need to read that. Basically, this is what the UN, how the UN defines food security. It says when all people at all times have access to healthy, safe, nutritious food that meets their daily needs. But I wanted to understand what this vague and rather dry academic term means for real South Africans in their kitchens in a domestic level. What does it mean for us? And I discovered 3 things. Firstly, that food security in the urban context has got nothing to do with whether or not there's enough food around. In fact, there's plenty of food around us all the time, deceptively so. The question is whether we have access to that food and what choices we make when we get hold of that food. The other thing I discovered is that 1 in 5 South African children is so poorly nourished that they will arrive at school with a lower IQ than they could have had. It will be a permanent state. They will do less well at school. They will emerge with a poorer education. They will be less employable as an adult. And the World Bank estimates that this kind of malnutrition can shave about 10% of someone's earning potential through the course of their life. And now this isn't just about one person's economic value as an economic unit to the economy. It's about the ability to become a self-actualized adult. And this malnutrition is because the child didn't get the right nutrients from the moment of conception until the age of 2, that critical 1,000-day window of opportunity to build the powerhouse of a brain that you need to take you through the rest of your life. And the third thing I discovered is that the city makes us fat and sick. This was quite astonishing and a little bit of a relief, given I, like many people, have always grappled with issues around weight, going up and down and up and down. In the past, we have blamed the individual. The medical community said, if you got fat and sick, it's because you were lazy and you ate badly. Now it's your responsibility to get yourself well again. The relief is that there has been a complete sea change in attitude from the medical community, and they argue that actually the growing weight problem we see around us is a normal response of normal people to a very abnormal environment. So what are some of the factors driving this? Well, it's to do with the layout of the city. We have these sprawling landscapes that push us into cars, mechanization that means we don't have to move too much to work. It has to do with supermarkets and the commodification of food. The fact that food, particularly healthy, nutritious, more expensive food, tends to cluster in communities that are wealthy, where you and I live, leaving poorer communities with food deserts, where the food is less healthy and more expensive. It also has to do with cultural perceptions around food. Many of us move to the city and we want to leave behind the peasant food of our parents. And I use that word reservedly because it's value loaded. But that is the kind of language coming through in the literature. We want modern, sophisticated, branded, highly processed foods. It also has to do with the fact that we have evolutionary priming that makes us desire some of these highly processed, sugar-loaded foods. In fact, sugar triggers the same response in your brain as cocaine does. And then, of course, the modern food industry knows this and tailors food recipes to hit that pleasure center in our brain. So while I was traveling around visiting these homes and getting these people's stories, I asked each family, there were 8 in total, if they would lay out the ingredients of one main meal that they were going to have that day and took a photograph. And I discovered afterwards that these photographs illustrated really nicely what the Human Sciences Research Council, or how the HSRC defines food security at a domestic level. This is a wealthy family of 4 farmers in the Free State. You can see the meal is diverse. There's lots of plants, some protein, lots of color, some carbohydrates as well. What makes them highly food secure is that they will have access to this food tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. There's no threat of a shortage, barring some bizarre catastrophe. This is a blue-collar family in Durban, family of 5. You can see there's still ample food there. They've done away with a lot of the vegetable matter, though. There's just a little bit of salad. What's interesting about this is they didn't put out the 4 liters of sugary drinks that went on the table. A reminder that the calories we drink are often completely invisible to us. We forget that they're actually part of our nutrition. They're moderately food secure because basically they will have access to this food indefinitely, but because they are cash strapped at the end of each month, there might be an anxiety around running short of food. So living with the occasional fear of hunger might mean that they're moderately food secure. This is the meal of a woman who lives just outside Cape Town. This made up a huge bowl of imifino, which is a Xhosa meal, traditional. The spinach is great, but unfortunately there isn't much nutrient anywhere else in the meal. She's on a social grant, so she's pretty poor. She has done away with the quality, but she still has plenty of quantity. And then this was the meal that the family of 5 from Swaziland were going to have. This was the meal they were going to have the evening after I'd seen the kids eating the bread for breakfast. There was nothing else in the house. There was no other food in the house. And the father opened the kitchen cupboards to show me. They would be regarded as very low on the food secure status because they have done away with quantity as well as quality. And it's at this level of hunger that one will start to see the physical wasting. But now this is why food and hunger and malnutrition in the city context can be regarded as, is often called the hidden hunger. Because the food that's available to us in the city is often very cheap, so even the poorest of the poor can get hold of it. But it's so highly processed, so you get all the macronutrients, the protein, the carbohydrates, the fats, but you don't get the micronutrients. So you end up bulking up on empty calories, so you put on weight, but you're still malnourished at a micronutrient level. And this is why in the global south we have this massive double burden of disease. People getting heavy, having all the lifestyle-related diseases, and then having to deal with malnutrition. I'm running out of time. Oh. So the food system is broken, very badly so. The industry has been benefiting off of our addiction to some of these foods, and yet the state has to pay to pick up the healthcare tab of treating them. What I think we need to do is to start to apply the principle of the polluter pays. So from the world of environmental law, if you pollute a wetland, you have to pay to clean it up. I think we need to start to see aspects of the food industry as a polluter of the nutritional landscape, and then require that they mop up the mess. The other thing is that 1/3 of all the food we produce around the world is wasted. That's not just a waste of the calories and the nutrients, but also the soil, the water, the atmospheric space used to grow that food. If we're going to grapple with how to feed this growing population, we need to stop fixating on how to produce more calories per hectare and ask what we do with the calories per hectare. If we are taking these environmentally very expensive calories that are wholesome and healthy, we take them from the farm and we put them through an industrial food system that destroys them, strips out the nutrients, leaves us fat and sick on the other side, is that not as wasteful? We need to do 3 things, if I can get this in 1.5 minutes. We need to see, so this is about how to find the optimal diet for ourselves, but also one that is environmentally sustainable. We need to see sugar as the new tobacco. It's toxic, it's addictive, and it's hidden in almost all of our foods. It has no food security value, just gives us jobs and contributes to GDP. We're going to see sugar regulated the way we see tobacco regulated. Mark my words. We need legislation and research that is free of the lobbying influence of the food market. The same way we need to see a similar separation of policy around issues of alcohol and tobacco. So the medical community argues that we have, the free market system has failed us. The food industry has free access to us as a market, and yet we're getting fat and sick as a result. So we definitely need particularly legislation that protects people under the age of 25, because their brains are young, they're underdeveloped, they are impulse-driven, and they are highly vulnerable to addictive learning. And the other thing is we need to calculate the true cost of food. When food that is high in sugar, high in refined carbohydrates, and highly processed, when the cost of that food reflects the environmental resources used to grow it, as well as the health costs of treating the diseases associated with eating it, then those foods will become a lot more expensive relative to healthier, fresher, safer foods. At the moment, the way we're eating, this diet that we're eating, the so-called Western diet, is destroying our health, but it's also gobbling through the resources that are supposed to be used to feed tomorrow's generation. Thank you.